All right, we will call this special meeting to order of the Yuba City City Council. This special meeting is being held in council chambers, which are open for the public attendance and participation. The meeting will also be live streamed for public viewing, but not participation at the link identified in the agenda. Emailed comments sent and received by the city clerk at least 24 hours prior to the meeting were distributed to the city council prior to tonight's meeting. Can I get roll call, please?
Mayor Shaw.
Here.
Vice Mayor Boomgarden.
Here.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Kirchner.
Here.
Councilmember Pasquale.
Here.
All right. Vice Mayor, will you lead us in the pledge tonight? Please stand.
Going to be saluting our flag and starting with I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Although this is a special meeting, the first item up on our agenda tonight is appearance of interested citizens. You're welcome and encouraged to participate in this meeting. Public comment is taken on action items appearing on the calendar for tonight's meeting when they are called. Public comment on any other item within the scope of the city's jurisdiction, including items not listed on the agenda, will be considered at this time. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Members of the public submitting written requests at least 24 hours prior to the meeting will be allotted 5 to comment per speaker. Repetitive comments, as with anything, can be limited, and large groups are encouraged to select representatives to express the opinions of the group. Do we have any comments from the public tonight? All right. Seeing none, we are going to go ahead and move right on to business item 2, which is Homekey 3.0, Merriment Village and Habitat for Humanity. Before Ms. Langley starts, many people may ask, how did we get to where we're at tonight? And this all came about from an email which came to the City Council a week ago asking for a $7.5 million unsecured line of credit to help fund the gap funding on this. And we have to call a special meeting so that the 5 of us can get together and have a real honest to goodness conversations about this, because the Brown Act applies and we can't talk all behind closed doors and figure out what we're doing. So I want to thank our special guests who are here tonight. We've got Steve Smith from the county and Chairman Dan Flores from the county. We've had meetings over the weekend and trying to figure out the gap funding for this. And hopefully tonight we will be able to figure out what some paths going forward are. So with that, Ms. Langley, I will turn it over to you to give us a report and a update on where we're at with everything.
All right, thank you. Just for point of clarification, Joseph, I don't see the HCD rep has joined via Zoom.
Oh, I guess they're going to, they weren't able to make it tonight, it looks like.
Okay.
They asked if the meeting was recorded, and they'll be reviewing, and we're setting up meetings.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right. So since early 2022, the city has partnered with Habitat for Humanity Yuba Center to develop an affordable housing project. This started with an ad hoc committee of Vice Mayor Boomgarden and former Councilmember Harris, where they looked at a variety of existing developed sites throughout the city. Once it was determined that none of those sites were feasible, we then started looking at vacant property, which is when we looked at this property located on the east side of Walton Avenue. And from that came the proposed Merriment Village project, a 217-unit apartment complex located east side of Walton, north of Franklin, with phase 1 being a 79-unit building right here fronting Walton Avenue. And this is the phase 1 building. It's a 4-story building. And then phase 1 also included the site improvements for the remainder of the site. So just some key dates for Merriment Village. May 2nd, 2023, City Council authorized a joint application with Habitat to apply for Homekey 3.0 funds and authorized a funding commitment of $1,787,922 in fee waivers and $155,000 annually of permanent local housing allocation funds for as long as the city received those funds. In February 13th, 2024, an award letter was received from HCD indicating that Merriment Village was being awarded $24,632,331 in Homekey funding, broken down as shown on the screen. And then it took a little bit of time for HCD to get us the standard agreement. During that time, there's a lot of back and forth with Habitat, a lot of documents that needed to be provided. In the milestones that were identified in the standard agreement was that by February 13th of 2025, all acquisition, construction, and/or rehabilitation must be completed, and by May 13th, 2025, capital funds must be fully expended and full occupancy by the target population must be achieved. So here we are in March 2025, so obviously we didn't meet that timeline. On July 2nd, 2024, City Council received a project update from Habitat and considered the terms of the standard agreement. We were given a very short timeline to execute the standard agreement, and so as part of that, Council expressed concern about the agreement deadlines, which you can see they were extremely tight, and then Habitat had indicated that there may be some gap funding required, so Council directed staff to work with the City Attorney and Habitat to develop an agreement outlining the responsibilities of both. So on July 9th, 2024, a covenant and loan agreement was provided to Habitat for review and executed the same day. And that covenant and loan agreement was recorded against the property. And then in a minute, I'll go into the requirements, part of the requirements of that agreement. And then there was, again, a little bit of a delay between execution of the standard agreement and when we actually received the Homekey funds. So the covenant and loan agreement indicated that Habitat shall not be entitled to any disbursement of funds until the following have been satisfied. So for insurance, they need to provide insurance. They needed to secure the gap funding. They needed to execute the construction note and construction deed of trust to the city, which is insured by a loan title policy. The affordability covenant, as defined in the standard agreement and is approved by the city, shall be executed and recorded against the property. And then the key thing is that Habitat is not in default with this covenant and loan agreement or the standard agreement. If you go back to the milestones that were identified in the standard agreement, we had concerns about the ability, and Habitat did as well, the ability to meet that time frame. So in October 2024, Habitat submitted a request to HCD for a timeline extension, which was denied. November 14th, 2024, Habitat indicated there was some gap funding required. They outlined a plan to satisfy the $7.3 million gap. $2.15 million would be self-performed for a portion of the construction. This would be a lot of the finish work, landscaping, things like that. $300,000 per month for 1 year to raise $3.6 million in cash, $400,000 in PLHA program funding from the city, and then they were anticipating applying for a home grant in the amount of $1.2 million. November 26, 2024, staff provided a comprehensive list of items needed to comply with the covenant and loan agreement. December 16th, 2024, Habitat provided a response to those listed items. In December 2024, staff worked with Habitat to determine if the project was eligible for the Homekey Plus program. The Homekey Plus program was intended for projects that did not have sufficient Homekey funding to be able to get additional funding. This project was not eligible. And I have to say, throughout this process, Habitat, the Thurman team, they've consistently applied for grants. And in each situation, for whatever reason, there's been different things that either we haven't qualified for or it hasn't panned out. In January 9th, 2025, Habitat submitted a gap funding and bonding strategy to the city. Again, they would self-perform $2.15 million of the construction, set aside $300,000 a month for a year to contribute $3.6 million, the $408,000 of PLHA money, and then also $1.2 million home grant program or AHP program. January 16th, 2025, so January, Habitat team submitted an extension request to HCD. They granted it, and the new extension provides for capital expenditures and construction must be completed by October 13th, 2026, and occupancy deadline by January 13th, 2027, and they have been able to provide a schedule from Hilbers that shows a completion date that complies with this. So the new key dates, February 18th, 2025, council authorized a subrecipient agreement for the city's 2020 PLHA funding with Habitat in the amount of $465,000. So we would contribute roughly 3 years worth of PLHA money. And then March 3rd, 2025, so this goes back to last Monday, Habitat submitted a financial plan and request for loan for the current gap funding of $7,047,672. And this would be in the form of an unsecured line of credit up to $7.5 million at a 4% interest rate amortized over 10 years. The loan structured as a not to exceed non-collateralized agreement, no early prepayment penalties, and interest earnings from Homekey funds could serve as a safeguard against potential cost overruns. So it's estimated that the interest earnings on the Homekey grants would be about $1 million per year. We received the funding in October, so we've accumulated about 6 months of interest at this point in time. So where we are today is we have a mandated construction commencement date in April. The project's at a critical point, and without sufficient funds, there are limited options. So a couple of options are to determine that the project is not feasible and return the Homekey funds to HCD. I know that, from staff's involvement and council's involvement in this project over the last several years, it's not desirable to anybody to see us return these funds. Another option would be to submit a request to HCD to reduce the scope of work so that a scaled-down version of the project can be constructed. Or this is why we're here tonight, other options. What other options are available to the city and to Habitat to move this project forward? From a fiscal impact perspective, no Homekey funds have been dispersed. So based upon that covenant and loan agreement, the requirements for disbursement of funds have not been met, so we're still holding on to the full $24 million. We've expended funds for staff and approximately $15,000 in consultant fees. We've hired a consultant to act as our project manager. City staff have not done a Homekey project before. This consultant has, and we want to make sure that we're complying with all the things that we need to comply with. Council awarded the $465,000 in PLHA money to Habitat. And then Habitat has invested over $3.7 million of their organizational funds to secure the property, conduct environmental assessments, complete design work, and navigate the permit process. So that brings us to where we are tonight, and staff is requesting a direction regarding next steps.
All right, Ms. Langley, thank you. We're going to break this into a couple of different segments the way we handle it tonight. So first I would ask the council, do you have any questions for Ms. Langley about what she presented tonight, how we got here specifically? Okay. Hearing none of that, we have questions in those regards. We're actually going to open it up to public comment, and I've got several speaker cards on that. But I want to explain how public comment works. It's not a Q&A time, it is public comment. And we all agree that this is a good project. The city wants it to go forward. We have to overcome a gap funding issue, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So I would ask, with all the speaker cards here, that as long as your comments are on how we're going to overcome gap funding and move forward and make this project go, you're more than welcome to speak. If your comments are simply in regards to what a great organization Habitat is and what kind of project this is and what it would do for our community, we already know that. We're on board with that. This tonight is all about the gap funding. So I'm going to go right down the cards the way they were. And if you have anything to add in regards to the gap funding, we'll be happy to hear that. But trust me, we already agree that Habitat is a great organization. This is a great project. So Johnny Burke.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'm not sure what that parameters, because I wasn't going to try and convince you of the project, but I wanted to give some information that the governor put out a couple weeks ago that I think is pertinent to low-income housing. So am I permitted to share that? So 2 weeks ago, Governor Newsom released, he actually didn't send any correspondence to us as continuums of care. I don't know if major cities such as Yuba City or the counties received any notification, but the state began a new website called accountability.ca.gov. And Newsom said that he was not putting any dollars of HAP funding in the current budget until he saw some benchmarks starting to be achieved. And so those benchmarks in that website are broken down by county. There's 3 sections. There is the housing, there is homelessness, and there's behavioral health. And so in the housing category, I don't know if they're very current on their stats. I know for the homeless aspect, they were taking our numbers from the 2023 point in time, kind of ignored all the numbers that we've submitted to the state of California over the last year and a half since then, but they are benchmarking us on that. And so we're going to be addressing that. We just did a point in time count. For the housing numbers, they had some things on there that were very important that I want to make sure the council knows, and I hope that they're not current on their numbers, but they are evaluating Sutter County as a whole. And they show that everyone's housing compliance is correct except for Live Oak, so I'm going to be contacting Live Oak Council to let them know because it's got a red mark on it. In addition, for the housing elements that each jurisdiction and municipality has to provide, it's an 8-year window, as you all know, and we're about 3 years into that window. And so for Sutter County specifically, for the extremely low-income housing, we're at 0% of housing. For low-income housing, we're at 1%. For moderate, we're at 0.2%. And for above moderate, it's at 12.1. So we have some real significant shortfalls. And so what Newsom indicated is that if municipalities and jurisdictions aren't meeting their housing element, this was going to be a big mark, and he's potentially going to hold back funding. That funding that he holds in his hand, besides anything else that you might receive, is what we call the HAP, or the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program, in which our area between Sutter County, Yuba County, and the Homeless Consortium has received $10 million over the 6-year period that we've had this. And so right now it's 0 for the next thing. So I know everyone agrees it's a great project. I just wanted to put that on. I guess it's a little extra pressure. We don't have a lot of affordable housing projects in front of us. Obviously, we have Richmond Village, the regional housing. We're very excited about that in this project. So my only comments tonight were in agreement with you all is that somehow, some way, we need to make this happen. That HAP funding, although we don't use a lot of it toward affordable housing, because even though it's a lot over a short amount of time, you can see how expensive housing is, we do use some of that money toward affordable housing projects. The Turpin Street project, which was a collaboration between Yuba County, Sutter County, and the Homeless Consortium funding toward Habitat, that was money from the HAP program. We gave several $100,000 from the HAP program to regional housing for the Cedar Lane project in Yuba County, and we've already allocated $200,000 in HAP funding to regional housing for the Richland project, which they haven't cashed with us yet as they're lining up their others. So just wanted to let you know that the importance of the HAP program, because it also funds our emergency shelters, our day centers, outreach, and a variety of things. So I know a lot of that stuff you already know. I just want to make sure everybody knew, in case you hadn't seen that the governor's now holding this purse over our hands. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Johnny. We will go to the second card, which is Walton Hornbrook, if you have anything to, okay. We will go to the third, Connie Gallardo. Do you have anything to add as far as the gap funding? Okay. Logan, is it? Jim, yes. Okay. And the last is Marcus Grant. Okay. And I want to share, I appreciate you guys showing up. We duly note you guys are here supporting Habitat, but that's not the real issue tonight. It's what we're about to get into, which is all the gap funding. Is there any more comments from the public that wants to talk about the gap issue that we have with this project? Any more comments from the public? All right. Joseph, I know you're going to be back and forth. Do you want to make something down for your 3 minutes?
No, I'll wait for it.
Okay. All right. Last call. Is there any comments about the gap funding? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to pull it back, and we will begin to discuss this as a council. And as we get started, Mr. Flores, Mr. Smith, do you guys have any comments? Because we met yesterday that you would like to start at this time, or do you just want to get the conversation going?
I think it does get the conversation going.
Okay. All right. Any initial questions from the council before we dive straight in? Okay. Well, then I'm going to start it off. Mr. Hale, would you come up to the mic back there and give us what your proposals are for going forward with the gap funding.
Yeah, I provided a letter. I don't know if, is that something we could bring up, or I can just bring it up on the phone here?
Yeah, so council has a copy of that, but I think it's for the benefit of the audience so that they can hear what you were suggesting.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can open that here. All right, I'm going to read from this. And I just wanted to say to the staff of Sutter County and the City of Yuba City, council members and supervisors, really appreciate you taking the time to come together this weekend. I know it was very last minute, and to give up your weekend to meet, discuss this, and try to figure out a solution to bring this forward. So greatly appreciated. Going into the documentation. So the gap funding that we had listed on the project was $7,047,672. The goal of Habitat is being able to use a lot of general funds that we generate from donors, and that comes across. I know there was a mention of like what the Restore generates. The various sources Habitat for Humanity acquires funding from is we have about 45 home loans. These are loans from homes we built, low-income housing that have been sold to families. We generate rental income. We actually, as part of a Homekey project, acquired a 312-unit storage facility that also helps generate money, including the Restore program that if any of you have been in the Marysville area to the old Mervin's building, you can see our facility there. And those all help in generating funding. One of our biggest funding raisers also is our CalAIM program. And that is a program that through Medi-Cal was generated to provide services for housing. And through those various sources, we generate an amount of money each year. Typically, the organization currently generates around $10.5 to $11 million. And then after we take into account all of our staffing cost, organizational cost, we're usually left with, between $4.5 and $6 million, depending on the year, that we can take and apply towards programs. In this case, one of the commitments we were putting forward is to be able to apply an amount of that towards this project. And that's kind of part and parcel to the $3.7 million, over the last year, purchasing the property, paying for a lot of the elements while we were waiting to, secure funding for the project. That's just how we typically go about it. Because one of the issues pertaining to nonprofit organizations is when we receive grants, most of these grants require projects to be built at prevailing wage. And so what occurs is it can often be difficult to acquire loans because typically prevailing wage, when someone comes in and appraise, is usually a little higher than the value of the property at that time. And a lot of times when you're securing loans, they don't want to take a second position to something that was a project that was done at prevailing wage. So a lot of times that makes it difficult for securing loans, which is typically why we generate a lot of revenue through grants, cash flow, and things like that to move a lot of these projects forward. I will say experience-wise, we've done a number of projects this way. The one that's most similar would be our Orland project. We did a Homekey round 2. We partnered with the County of Glenn, the City of Orland, and through very much a similar process, and we built an apartment complex using Homekey funds, and there was about a $1.7 million gap, and we were able to fulfill that with funding from our various programs. Sometimes the goal often is to be able to acquire grants, such as the home grant, such as PHLA. I know we also, as a group, another big grant we applied for was AHSC, which was the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities grant. So that would be one of the biggest elements for us going forward is, to apply that funding towards the project. I think our biggest concern is just upfront money, because as the projects go along, we typically generate money very well to put towards it. But also as projects go along, you have cost increases. So if the project per se, we put a year together to acquire all the funding, what our concern is just that the project might be $2 or $3 million more expensive by the time we get to that, and then we're looking for more funding. So our hope would be through, with various partnerships, such as even with Sutter County, maybe helping out with what we're doing, could allow us more availability to acquire funding and fill those gaps. And then whatever is not filled could be filled through a safety net provided by Habitat for Humanity, through gifts in kind, through our general funds that we donate, and to any grants we secure along the way. Most of that, sorry, I was going to read through this document, I just said it all, but most of it's kind of organized throughout this email and broken down on some of the possibilities of being able to move forward.
Okay, I think going back to where we started was possibly just reading that email with what is the plan that you're bringing forward. A lot of great information of what you might do, but what are you actually asking of the city of Yuba City and possibly even Sutter County? That's really what we've got to get to. So can you read your letter of what you were asking us and what your proposal was so that the audience can hear exactly what you sent to us?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I will read as follows. So Habitat for Humanity Yuba Center is committed to ensuring the success of this project by covering any funding gaps through a combination of organizational funds, gifts in kind, grants, general donations, and work completed by our staff. As of today, the remaining balance of GAP funds stands at $7,047,672. Habitat for Humanity Yuba Center has generated nearly $5 million in funding that can be allocated to projects over the course of the year, increasing to $605 million this fiscal year in 2026. In addition, we have already secured in-kind donations, including paint, materials, furnishings, appliances, finish work valued at $200 million towards our commitment. Over the past 18 months, we have issued $3.7 million into project.
Excuse me, well, Mr. Hell, those numbers you're throwing out are definitely way off basis, because we were never 200 million and this and that. It was like 2 million in kind such. So you want to?
Did I say 200 million?
Yes, you did. And you said 500 and you said 600 and some odd million. Yeah. If you've got that kind of money, then why are we here?
Yeah.
So
I apologize for that. I mean, 6.5 million is what we plan to generate fiscal year 2026 based on our projections. Sorry. And then over the past 18 months, we have generated 3.7 million into the project. 2.15 million was for land acquisition, 500,000 on pre-development, and then 150,000 in insurance adjustments for the portions of the project. As of March 1st, we have submitted applications for a 1.6 million home fund grant and a 2 million AHP federal home loan bank grant. If awarded, these funds will cover nearly 50% of the remaining gap funding and significantly reduce the financial commitment required by our organization. Additionally, we have worked with local partners to secure fee reductions, including school fees, and have coordinated with PG&E to offset costs associated with undergrounding roadside power lines. We are also exploring construction gap funding through Five Star Bank and other banking partners. We particularly appreciate the willingness of the city to provide nearly $1.8 million for the entire project and approximately $600,000 applying to phase one in reducing fees, as well as the currently awarded and future allocations of PHLA funding. With a projected completion date of December 2026, we believe we can secure additional funding and generate sufficient revenue to close the remaining funding gap. While we understand concerns regarding the allocation of construction funds, we have been proactively funding ongoing project costs as reflected in the $3.7 million already invested. Another key opportunity we are exploring is prioritization of funding streams available to Homekey partners. Last week, we met twice with HCD to discuss potential funding opportunities that could help make this project more feasible. The discussion centered on how Habitat for Humanity Yuba Center could align with Homekey funding priorities and other available resources to ensure project success. A primary concern is that delaying progress while waiting to secure every funding source may cause the funding gap to continue to grow, making it increasingly difficult to close. Moving forward with construction and securing pricing commitments now will allow us to maximize available funding as the project advances. One of the most promising developments is the potential to bring Sutter County into the partnership. We understand the concern regarding potential project financing risks and believe that partnering with a trusted agency that has successfully collaborated with us on a previous project could provide additional funding and stability for this project. And if anyone has any additional questions or that I could answer.
Questions this far? Any questions this far? So, the question I have is, you sent us that email, but what's Plan B? If this project moves forward and you don't get the grants, you don't, you've talked about setting aside $300,000 a month from the restore. And how far along are we in that process? How much have you got set aside to actually fund this? Because, again, it's a great project.
Yeah.
This is not about killing the project. This is about covering the gap, because it's already out there that, we have a $1.2 million deficit at the city this year, and we've taken steps to overcome that. So a $2 million loan, a $7 million loan, it might as well be $100 million. We're already upside down 1.2. Can't speak for the county, but I know they are like every other county in the state. They're facing challenges as well. So what happens if you're not able to get, what is your plan B?
Yeah, so, we do have assets that, if it came down to it and we weren't able to acquire, if it were like $1 million or $2 million or an amount that, was still beyond that capability, we could look for, as we're doing now, continue to look for loans and funding sources that could possibly come forward, even funding it through a credit line. One of the elements we run into is we do have other properties, but the problem that occurs is one of the things we need to do is work with HCD and be able to see if they can allow us to look at liquidity on some of the properties. I think that would help in offsetting some of the costs if we weren't able to, attain this gap funding. So, but in, many of the years we've been operating, that's what we go off of, is that we've year after year, we'll generate money. We know we're going to generate money. And, really feel that we can complete this gap.
I see lights going on. Yeah. Did you have something, Vice Mayor? Okay, go ahead. Councilmember Pasquale.
Mr. Hale, I'm looking at your audit right now, June 30th, 2024. And your revenues are 10.5 million, and you have expenditures of 6.5 million. Okay, that leaves you with $4 million, and you're willing to gamble with 3.6 million of what you make possibly in the next year and not cover any kind of issues or problems with any of your other expenses. I have a problem with that. When you don't have a safety net of any kind of reserves, you tend to fail. And looking at this from a business standpoint, and if a banker was to see this, you wouldn't get past the first door.
Yeah, so, anyway.
I'm not done yet.
Okay.
So, with that being said, and you keep saying things like we have an opportunity or we've submitted. Development 101 is you have all the money you need to do your project and not scramble when you're at the doorstep of building that project. And I have that's just basic development, and you don't. And you've burned almost 2 years of circling around and around and around trying to find on a wish and a prayer. And that, to me, is not a sound way to go about developing something that is so important to this community. For that, I have nothing else.
Vice Mayor.
I'll approach this a little differently. First, thanks to everybody that came here tonight. It's nice to see folks that are engaged, plus those who have a stake, as we all do, in trying to get this project to the finish line. As Ms. Langley mentioned, of all the council folks, I'm the one that's been most deeply invested in this through my participation with Thurman Consulting, Habitat for Humanity, Hilbers Incorporated, all of the council folks that we've worked with, trying to bring this much needed affordable housing to our area. I do need to make one little, it's nonpartisan, but when I hear, thank you, Mr. Burke, for bringing up the comments, that seems counterintuitive to me when the governor says, look, you're upside down with your housing, but we're not going to give you any money to do anything. And so for me, it goes back to, again, if we're in this deficit and we're trying to scramble out of it and trying to make a project work, that's my desire. I have done and will continue to do my best to see this thing get done. But as Councilmember Pasquale mentioned, it's no secret that the state is in poor fiscal health. All of us sit on various boards. I was in Sacramento last week at SACOG. They're throwing up the yellow flag. Forget this funding. We don't know about that funding. We're not sure about this. And this is for our roads, okay, typically. In fact, their last funding was the lowest since 2013. Everyone's scrambling for dollars. So to Councilman Pasquale's comments, I don't know that we can sit back and rely on the state to come help us here. It'd be great if they did. And I think it's admirable that we continue to go down that route. It would be wrong for us not to do that. But this is a hole in a funding situation. I have to also admit that I'm a little disappointed in HCD not being here. I think that they're a stakeholder in this. And if I look back at anything that I think I wish I had gotten more involved with over the last 6 months or so, is probably having conversation myself with HCD. Not that I don't trust anything that anybody's saying. It's just that it seems to me that as the awardee, if you will, I know Ms. Langley's had, and our staff has had conversations with them, but it's one of those things where at this point I'm going, okay, HCD, what are you going to do? What can you do? Can we do 3 stories instead of 4 stories? Can we do something where we invite, the county's been super gracious in meeting with us to see if there's anything they can do. I don't know what role, if any, they can play, but they've been gracious enough to come to the table and offer whatever help that they can. And so as we play this out, we're going to continue with discussions with them. And for that, I think the community should be very thankful that the county is willing to step in if there's a method or a path for them to do so. But at the end of the day, we're sitting here I had one more option. I know that the city of, I believe it's Long Beach, just turned their Homekey money back. Is that, or that's correct, right? It's Long Beach. Didn't want to say the wrong city. And I believe it was $8 million. I mean, maybe we need to have a conversation and say, reallocate the $8 million to our project. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are going through my brain as I'm trying to seek a solution. I don't know if they would do that or not, but if they've got money, let's get some of it at least. So, that to me is something that, as we're talking about options, those are things that are running through my head right now. And I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer or the brightest light in the chandelier, but I just think we're at a spot right now where we need to really roll up our sleeves. Not that we haven't done that for 2.5, 3 years already, but now we're at crunch time. It says we're supposed to have a shovel in the ground in April of 2025. I don't know if there's a date to that or if it's just by April 2025, but here we sit. And, it struck me as odd knowing what I think most people know about our financial situation here in the city, that, someone would ask us for a $7.5 million or $7.5 million unsecured loan. That's tough, right? We're not flush at all. We're frozen positions and we're scaling back services. Others up and down the state are in the same boat. So to me, that's not an option going forward, is an unsecured loan, just because I just cannot, in good conscience, make a financial decision like that, that would potentially place the city in jeopardy. We don't have that kind of money right now. So my comments for now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Kirchner, do you have anything for?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have, thank you, Joseph, for that presentation. That was very informative. Thank you for that. So I've got several questions. One of which being, there was a discussion about the city and the county are both eligible for CBDG, CSBG, PHILA, and then ESG. Are any of these opportunities, are all of these opportunities available for both the city and the county, or is the county eligible for some funding that I don't know about, or we're not available to us?
Yeah, so the eligibility is everyone can apply. You just have to be a municipality, a county, any sort of jurisdiction is allowed to seek those funds.
Okay. And kind of to piggyback on the Vice Mayor's comment about the project. Now, when this thing is built out, it's at 217 units. First phase being 79. Now, I understand that the grant was that was the number that was proposed. Is there any way that can be maybe modified to potentially bring the first phase of this project down? Or are we married at 79 units?
So one of the things we can always go back to HCD is look at a different building and see if they're willing to work with us on a different building as an option. So one of the things we're looking at with these meetings that we're doing with HCD, since we've kind of got to a point where, to make this final decision of switching, versus, having to give money back or something like that, that'd be great for this community, being able to see if there's some other options. So that was going to be one of the ideas to discuss with them, if that's a possibility. Or as Councilmember Boomgarden indicated, one of the things we were looking at too is we know some money for some projects no longer became feasible. So seeing if that's something they would be willing to put in a pot to help support projects. We know they've done that in the past. They've supplemented certain projects that had gone over. So that would be definitely something we would want to push for.
So this project, you filed for an extension and you received it, correct?
Yes.
How many times, and I don't expect you to have a crystal ball, but how many times will the state allow you to do that?
So you have to have good reason and purpose, and it's really up to a group. I don't think there's a limit. I know the reality is there's a couple Homekey 1 projects that are still out there trying to secure final funding. A couple of them were finished, I think, 3/4 of the way, and then they were looking for a little bit of gap funding to finalize the project. Some of them, it was just to add an additional building, items like that, but that's definitely something Homekey, ultimately, like the words Homekey expressed to us, or HCD expressed to us, is that they want to see the projects happen. They want to work with us to make sure we can bring them to fruition. The goal is, it's difficult for them too when they take the money back, because there's quite a bit of process that happens. And then if federal money was involved, that money leaves California. Okay. So, those are some of the reasons that they're really usually amenable to trying to work something out if we can find a road.
Thank you. And I think the next question is for the city manager. On the Homekey funding of the 24 and change million, the interest earned on that, what happens with that interest?
It can go towards the project, and so that's where it's estimated to generate approximately $1 million per year. That's why I saw it in an email.
So is that considered in part of your bottom line on the project?
We haven't yet added it to the project, but assume it would flow in as a safety net to it.
Okay,
as well.
because I'm thinking, potentially, if this were to get delayed and you get a further extension, you're generating interest on this potentially. That would further increase at least or it would shorten that gap.
You're generating interest, but you're also generating the cost going up due to inflation.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Thank you for that. So I want to circle back to the questions I asked about the funding with the city and the county. And is there something I'm not seeing that and I don't want the county to take offense to this, I'm just asking questions. But it almost looks on the surface, it looks like maybe the reason why the county's being asked to the table is they might be more willing to take the risk, unless there's some type of grant funding that they're able to accomplish and we're not. And you're telling me that we're open to the same grants, the city and the county, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there might be specific grants or grant amounts based on population and designation, but overall, any jurisdiction should be capable of acquiring any of those funds I listed.
Mr. Hale and Councilman Kirchner, I'm actually going to ask CAO Steve Smith to address that, because when we have questions, I want to make sure we're going to the source of where those questions are directed and no one else is answering for anyone else tonight, so we all get the right information. Mr. Smith, could you update us? Is there any magic well that you guys have that we don't have, or is it pretty much the same? Or
Well, yeah, thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members, Vice Mayor and council members. So there isn't anything specific. We just were willing to get involved to see if there's anything through HCD or any other programs that if we helped apply, would it open up any additional funding to help close that gap? I don't know if it would close the whole thing, but we just wanted to be available to see if there was something there. And we'd like to meet with HCD as well and see what we could do. And so we're just kind of doing our best to be helpful and want to see how we can help. I know through the Harmony Village, through the award-winning Harmony Village project that we completed in 2019. No, but I believe there was a gap there. It was smaller, and so it's not really the same as this. This is a bigger project overall. But again, we're just trying to find any way we can to help, and maybe it spreads the risk around if we can get other funds and maybe get it to a level that folks are more comfortable with. I know there's a lot of ifs there.
all right, thank you.
Mr. Smith, have you had an open meeting with your entire supervisors to discuss going to HCD, or is this just something that you're bringing to the table now?
Yeah, we have not, and we've had 2 supervisors involved in this per the Brown Act, and then I've just given a heads up to the other supervisors about the process separately. They can't discuss it because of the Brown Act, but they're aware of the situation, and if needed, then when we speak to HCD, if there's something that we can do that would require action, then I would take that to the Board of Supervisors.
Did you get your question answered?
Yeah, but I had another question now. We've got the chairman of the board going to speak.
I just have a follow-up comment, but go ahead.
Well, my point is that this is being televised, and all 4 of your other supervisors could be watching. So are we in a Brown Act situation here?
No, I mean, they can't vote on anything, and I can.
They can still hear comment about what's being talked about.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not an attorney.
I will defer that to our city attorney up there. I think we're probably okay because any of us can pull this up and watch it online at a later date. Am I correct, sir? Do we have any concerns? We can't hear you. You're muted.
Nope, he's still muted.
Yeah, we're back to that. If we're good, a thumbs up. Not so good, midway. Okay, we got a thumbs up. If we're acting like the state of California, never mind. So
You're gonna have to teach them sign language, right? To do that, but that's great. It's like Big Brother watching over us there. I didn't know he was back there. But I just want to, Mr. Mayor and Vice Mayor and City Council, I just want to, first of all, thank you for inviting us here tonight to listen to the comments from the public and from yourselves. I think your leadership is
been demonstrated throughout this whole project. I know that Vice Mayor Boomgarden and Sean Harris were actively involved in the last couple of years and have put a lot of effort from the city's behalf in making sure that this Merriment Village comes to fruition. And I think you should be very commended to that. And here we are at this point. Even getting it to this point is commendable. I also want to, of course, thank Habitat for Humanity for the work that they've put in making sure that this comes to our community. I think we're all in agreement, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, that this is something that we need in this community. This is something we all want to press forward on. And I just want to follow up on Steve's comments. You know, our goal would be from here, from listening to this discussion, would be to go ahead and for sure reach out to HCD within the next couple of days. I know that Joseph Hale mentioned earlier, and he had mentioned yesterday when we had the meetings, that he had reached out to HCD and they were still waiting for some response. So we will actively pursue. We actually have our own connections with HCD through other projects. I've personally worked through Sutter County and also through the city of Marysville, and we will reach out to HCD as well, and then hopefully we can be together reaching out to city and county and see what other solutions that they may be able to provide to the project. And I think that, you know, it's great to have this discussion, but the big missing component is HCD, and it was unfortunate tonight that they weren't going to be here. So we're hoping that we can get that conversation online as soon as possible. But, you know, I just wanted to come up here and really commend you for getting it to this point, because I think the public needs to understand that the desire of the city council, the desire of the county, and the desire of Habitat is to really move this project forward and to come up with those solutions, and having an open forum and discussion is really important to do that. Mr. Pasquale, as soon as we have initial conversations with HCD, we would bring it to our public meeting as well and make sure that we have conversation, and we couldn't move forward without a vote of our own board as well. So we'll be doing that. Hopefully they're not watching TV tonight, and we'll see how it goes. But, you know, that's a very big concern of ours as well. So I just wanted to come up and make those statements that we're very supportive to continued discussions, and we look forward to speaking with HCD.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Flores. So, Ms. Cole, do you have any questions at this time,
I don't have questions. I can say a few things, if you don't mind.
if you'd like?
So, yeah, in terms of questions, I don't have any at the moment. Thank you all for being here. Solutions, though, just to put in my 2 cents, I do think it'd be a shame to return the money. It would be nice to maybe try to invest some time in asking about that $8 million from Long Beach. It almost seems to potentially be a fit. Also scaling down the project. I was privy to this topic probably a little over a year ago when I first started coming to the meetings. And from the start, it did feel a little bit shaky. I just completed a unit with my high schoolers on the 1920s and 30s, and it's really scary to me to I guess, irresponsibly spend and use too much credit to get what we need. I just don't know if that's appropriate. On top of that, I just also have at top of mind, it's not our money to spend, it's the citizens. And I really don't think they'd be in favor. If they weren't in favor of a tax measure, they're certainly not gonna like this idea right now. So that being said, though, too, California is in need of a housing correction. Things are really out of control, and I feel like this kind of challenge is going to become more frequent. And it's really just a symptom of the disease that is maybe even the Surplus Land Act itself. Not a bad idea, but again, in the spirit of free enterprise, it maybe should just be a situation where this land is available to anyone. And I want to give a little bit of attention to an assembly bill right now. It's called AB 480. It's going to make things even harder for municipalities to develop in a timely manner. And so those are just my hesitations right now. I could say more, but I do feel like I just wanted to bring up AB 480. And there is a lot of pushback against it because cities are having a real challenge, and it's similar to this type of challenge that we're having.
Thank you. Mr. Hale, a couple of questions for you. And we're really trying to figure out how we can go forward. I think you've already heard loud and clear that the option we received last Monday is not a starter. We're in no position, even if we partnered with our colleagues at the county combined, we can't come up with that. So you mentioned earlier Five Star Bank. What's your current status with Five Star Bank and getting some financing going there?
Yeah, so we're still in process with them. One of the things that we just got back was our audit. One of the requirements they want to see is your most recent audit. So we just provided that to them. So we're just waiting on next steps to meet with them to see what kind of structure they would want to look at for acquiring funding from them, and also how much. So even if we're not able to meet the full amount, and just to mention that with the $7.5 million, we believe we would fulfill that with the funding and the things we have. We also have filled some of it. When you were asking about how much is set aside, we have acquired a number of gifts in kind to match that. Our staffing is also a portion of that funding, because part of the additional work that needs to be done is through that structure. So I think even as the months pass, that number is going to get smaller and smaller. So by the end of the amount, we may, the loan is really a safety net rather than something we intend on using. We believe we could fulfill it, but it was a safety net because we wanted to see if we could do that to insure the city. Whether the loan was through the city or through a bank, our ultimate goal is not to have to use it unless we can't come up with the funding. So we're going to continue, and it was Five Star Bank. We have a couple others that I can get you the list of. I know John and Bethany have been working with them to try and get information to a few different banks. Five Star just seemed, they actually were one that reached out to us, so they just seem, the reason I mentioned them is they feel like they would probably be the strongest because they had indicators that they wanted to get involved in doing a low-income housing project. So there was more than just the fact of doing a loan, but the potential of wanting to get involved in a community project here.
Knowing James, this is not then just a loan. This is you're looking at seed money from Five Stars. Really, what sounds like you're looking partially for.
Yeah, so we would probably, one of the things we discussed with them is getting it in the form of a loan that sits there until we actually need it. So if we, because one of the things too, and this is just to kind of go to the point, maybe it answers part of Pasquale's, I know, the statement he made is that when, if we get a loan for something and it's a secured loan, it's hard to then get a grant to cover that because they say, oh, you have coverage. But if we get something that's more of a credit line or a safety net, we can backfill that in and then use less of that and still acquire grant funding. So it's just really how we structure it, and that's why we're focused on more of getting some sort of safety net funding that stays there until we need it. So we're not using money that we don't necessarily need for the project, because we would rather not have to carry much of a note at all if we don't have to. So that's kind of how we structured it. And then going back, because one of the things as a nonprofit we have an issue too is when we acquire grant funding, much of it does have to get spent into the projects. Like, we can only hold on to so much as kind of a safety net. Part of our mandate is taking individuals' money that we receive and making sure it goes where we say it's going to go.
Right. We understand grant funding and nonprofit. Where I really struggle with this and has got me thinking outside of all kinds of boxes here, because again, it's a great project. And it's very sad that the five of us and all of you are in this room tonight because we're here where we're at. Because it would have been so much better if we'd overcome this, because the project needs to go forward. This is about $100 million project when it's all built out. And as much as we talk about the money over here, you talk about the time with Five Star or others, inflation is going up. Tariffs are going up. We've got a governor that's against everything he was for 30 days ago because he's thinking he's going to run for a national office. You got all these things that are changing on a daily basis. So we can't go on the assumption that we're going to get these things going forward. So that's where, we did that contract between the city and yourselves to make sure that we basically protect the taxpayers' dollars, because they entrusted us to be good stewards of it. We want this project to go forward. But on these, with Five Star Bank, back to what I need to know, just real short. Where are you at in that process? Are we going to have an answer in a week? Or are we at the beginning of the process? Is it going to take them 30 days? Really, where are we at? Because if they're wanting to move forward on a project, you know, I know the heads of the bank down there, projects like this, and Dan knows them as well, James isn't going to set on this. So where are we at in this process?
I would say that it's probably 30 days is probably a good timeline before we'd have a full answer.
Okay. So in the meantime, we're still $7.5 million upside down. How much have you set aside out of the $300,000 that you were talking about setting aside from the restore income? Have you set anything aside that there's reserves there, or what are we looking at? Because I'm trying to whittle away at this 7.5.
Yeah. So we have been setting aside money in the sense that we're still paying into the project. We're still paying to get design fees. We're paying various elements of the project as we go. So we have, I think, $300,000 or $400,000 that we can put in an account if necessary to hold this spot. But and then next month we could do 6. One of the elements we had too is as we're going forward with these projects, we're waiting on reimbursements for other grants because we spend into those as we go forward, and then they reimburse us, and then we can invest in a project. So right now we have $600,000 in reimbursements that'll come from the Prosperity Village grant that we renovated that building because that was a grant that we had with HCD. Because one of the elements we run into is we have several grants across several projects. Now we get reimbursements from them, but we have to still comply with all the timelines and deadlines on those. So a lot of those are wrapping up. Once we get the reimbursements, we'll have, I think, right now across other projects we're owed, I want to say 1.3 million in other reimbursements across other projects. We can start putting that into these, into an account to help pay down this.
And how soon can you get those funds? That's really what we're talking about. You tell you got 1.3, you got 600,000, you got 300,000. So based upon what you just told me, and the next 30 days, I'm looking at probably close to $2 million that you just said. Possibly there's 900,000 with what you just said. 300 now, 600 next month. So really trying to figure out where the $7.5 million is coming from. And do you have this money sitting in the bank to where you could put this in an escrow fund of some sort so that the city could see the good faith money sitting there?
So we have some of it, but going back to what I mentioned earlier is as we go through projects, we build up revenue and we can set it aside for that project that's going. So if we go, hey, over the next 18 months of the project, we'll definitely have $5 or $6 million that will be able to go into these accounts. It's just, not all up front.
Yeah, but that's, the problem is it's got to be up front. We have to figure out the $7.5 million up front. And so I'm trying to help you, help me, because I'm trying to figure out where we can whittle away at this. And it sounds like if we were to look at a check in the next 14 days, what could Habitat put into an escrow account that would say, here's funds that could be used towards this? Just a round dollar amount. What could you do in the next 14 days? By a little more. March 31st, the end of the month.
By the end of this month, I'd have to look at our numbers. I off the top of my head, I can't pull each week, but I can look at what our reimbursement dates are across our grants.
Okay, so that tells me we're still looking at $7.5 million because I don't have a number we can pull off of. Okay, so back to what the vice mayor was talking about earlier. HCD really holds the key on this, and I wish they were here tonight because we really need them in a room to sit down with us. The contract with HCD is pretty much ironclad unless they decide they will amend it. Have we asked them to amend this to maybe bring the scope down but leave it the funds since the inflationary costs have gone up? One thing that comes to my mind is this initial building is a 4-story building. I've seen buildings all around the world, skyscrapers. There's some downtown Sacramento to where they renovate the bottom floors, leave them shells up top, and then they come back and finish them later. Have you even approached HCD about doing something like that? This is the boxes we've got to get out of and start asking because we want this project to go forward.
Yeah, so, I mean, the elements that we brought forward to HCD include a number of these items. So when HCD gets back to us, hopefully in a few days, where we have a meeting scheduled with them, I believe later this week, that we're gonna actually meet them and go over a number of these items. And I just want to clarify one point real quick. So of the $7 million, we do already have the staffing that would commit to doing the work, which is about $600,000 of that accrued cost. And then on top of that, we have I want to say $1.8 million of the gifts in kind that's also included in that we already have. So the real number is really closer to 5. I know that's still not there, but I just wanted to clarify that point, because the idea of the $7 million was just to show this is the gap. We're going to provide all of this, but if we don't, it's a way that the city had it secured. So our goal was never I just wanted to clarify, to actually need or use that loan. But, so I just want to put that out there. But going back to the other statement you made, we've proposed a few different things to HCD, such as doing another building as a possibility. We've also proposed to them, well, one of the things we did get approved was adjusting the scope of work. We shrunk down some of the scope of work with Hilbers that reduced $2 million on cost, so that was something they approved, and we did. We can go back to the drawing board and try to see if we can adjust more amounts off of it. I think switching the building might even be a possibility. The only issue that we run into, though, that I want to clarify is the amount HCD gives you in the grant is subject to the work you're actually doing. So if we go and take a 60-unit building, then they're going to reduce the money for the grant.
They hold all the keys, because if they're amenable to changes because of the rising cost, whether it's like was mentioned earlier, give us what Long Beach returned, because if they would do that, boom, we're moving, if they give us the $8 million. If they would backfill on the backside and not hold our feet to the fire as the awardee of this and the conduit, then we're moving forward. I want to take a step back, because the public may not understand why we're so worried about releasing funds and why this is so important. From our perspective, once we crack those funds, it's not a little bit goes out and then we can return the rest if something doesn't work. It's an all or none. And so once we crack those funds of the 24 million that's here, it's all on the table, and we, the 5 of us and the city and the 70,000+ people live here, on the hook for making sure everything's good with the state. So that's why we're focusing on this gap funding. It's a great project. So do you have any other ideas that you have, Joseph, that might help put this together? Because that's really why we're here. We wanted to have a conversation amongst all of us.
Yeah, so the idea is, I would just go back to what I mentioned earlier, as I think it really works with meeting with HCD, adjusting the project, or seeking additional funding from them. I believe those two options would be the best to navigate this project forward. I think all the other actions and things that we're doing, I think, are kind of safety nets, just like the 5-star. We're going to reach out in 10 different directions, and if 2 or 3 work out, then we got a project. So that's just how we look at it. Reaching out to HCD, looking for additional grant sources, reaching out to the banks, trying to secure all of those funding sources, setting aside reimbursements we have. I think all of those are elements that just get us closer to where we need to be. And hopefully this week we'll know from HCD, or they'll at least push us off to a meeting that we can get a conclusion on this project, or an extension to give us a little more time to come up with that.
All right. Vice Mayor?
I just have a suggestion. I think we could drill round and round on this tonight. And, to me, and I mentioned it earlier, we as the awardee and the agency that actually has the money and actually is in charge of dispersing it, need to have a seat at the table with HCD.
You got it.
I mean, and that needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I know that we have mentioned that before, as far as over the last 48 hours anyway, of trying to get that meeting. I think at this particular point in time, the players in the room, whatever the will of the council is, but definitely the city of Yuba City needs to sit in front of a decision maker at an HCD in the next week, 2 weeks, hopefully It'd be great if it could be tomorrow. I know it's not going to be. But we need to have some answers about what they are able and willing to do, if anything. In the meantime, I appreciate the fact you guys are out, pulling levers and trying to do all that. And I think I would certainly say keep doing that. I know our brains will continue to try to figure something out. And I know, again, as I mentioned previously, our friends at the county are partners in this as well. And I look forward to feedback with them as well. But right now, Mr. Mayor, it's like we need to meet with HCD.
Yep. No, I would concur. Pasquale, do you have
That's
something?
what I was going to say. The HCD is critical in this. I did have one question, though. There's an amount out there that keeps popping up. It's $2.6 million in administrative expenses. Where is that going? That's part of that $26 million that you were granted, correct?
Yeah, so the 24.6, as it showed in there, about 2.615 million is programmatic, so that will go towards the project and over the next 5 years to help support and offset those costs. So,
So let me add.
Sure.
The grant does pay for some operational costs in the early years. Those go, tell me if I'm wrong here, Joseph, but those go away over time, and then the project is supposed to be self-sufficient to pick up those costs. But this gets the seed money to get those services.
So it is actual $26 million if this was to not go through fruition, that we would have to be returning.
24.
It's 24.
Yeah, it's 22 for the construction and 2.6 for the operations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
My miscalculation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. With I think we're really. Oh, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I was going to mention. So we about a month ago we asked HCD because we were looking for solutions, and I talked to Diana about them attending the ad hoc committee, and they had agreed. So I don't know if that might be a great format because they said they would take a seat and so that they can have someone who can work with us to help this go forward. And that was one of the reasons why I presented that.
That meeting is scheduled for March 19th. I believe it's at 4 p.m. And when we originally set that meeting, then we received the memo last Monday. At that point, council wanted to get together sooner than that to discuss this. And so we do have that March 19th meeting on the books. I don't know if that's soon enough for council's comfort in terms of a discussion with HCD.
I've got a couple of different ideas here that I'd like to pitch to the council based upon everything we've got. Joseph, do you have anything else to add at this point?
No.
Okay, then thank you. First of all, I appreciate all the open dialogue because we have to get this out and figure out, because there's not a single one of us that's got the answer to this, unless, I don't know, has Carm got 7.5? Isn't that the running joke? So, I think we need to approach this on a couple of different fronts. First of all, Vice Mayor, we do need to sit down with HCD as a city. And I would like to delegate 2 people that I think are very nimble and will bring a lot to the table to meet that meeting separately. And I'd like to have you, because you've been here since day one with this, and then Councilmember Pasquale, because yourself and Councilmember Cole are on the ad hoc. And but I know your 2 schedules can be pretty nimble very, very quickly. And you bring the ad hoc and you bring the history behind that, the institutional knowledge. So you guys can get to the decision makers with us as the awardees and have that discussion as soon as possible with just the city and HCD. The other 2 things I think that we need to go forward with is I do think that the ad hoc needs to get back on board on Thursday. We originally suspended it, but things started moving very, very quickly. And instead of having HCD as the focus, because you 2 will meet with them separately, it really needs to be what was brought forward at the council meeting, a comprehensive review of what everything's going on with Habitat in the city and what else is going on there, okay? So we can approach that. And then thirdly, I want to thank the county, for getting together with us over the weekend. None of us had the authority to solve anything on a Sunday afternoon, but we had a whole bunch of ears that was listening to each other and trying to, the old adage, you throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. And I appreciate you guys doing that. I will tell you from the standpoint, we've got an awful lot invested in this at the city. We welcome you guys to see if you can come up with anything to help on the backside to get this together, whether it's the CDBG money or whatever you guys have. There's just all these strings that are attached to both your allocations and our allocations, because we know that this isn't the only project that comes before us. So I think we need to hit it on all fronts. We're scheduled to meet again in a couple of days ourselves with the chair and vice chair and chair and vice chair. You guys meet with HCD. You guys meet as the ad hoc. And then we come back and figure out what all the information is at the next council meeting, possibly to go from there. Unless, Ms. Langley, you got something else you want to throw in the mix?
I was just going to note that the intention was for Joseph to do a presentation to the full council on April 15th related to the status of all of their projects in Yuba City. Mr. Bendorf is not available for the April 1st council meeting, and so that's one of the reasons we were wanting to defer it to April 15th so that he could be part of that discussion.
As the mayor, 1 of 5 would be fine with that, because the ad hoc's going to get that information later this week and start working on that.
March 19th is the scheduled meeting. That's the ad hoc meeting.
Right, that's these two and them. HCD will be these two and HCD.
Right, March 19th is next week.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. So am I confused, or are we all confused?
You said this, I've heard you say this week, so I just
Oh,
want to
sorry.
make sure that we're all on the same page here.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's tax season. My weeks run together. So absolutely, you're exactly right. But Mr. Hale would like for you to present mid-month next month what you're going to report to the ad hoc and start working with them. Okay, that way the entire council can come up, and then hopefully between all of us hitting this from every different angle, we can figure this out. I can't stress enough, time is not a luxury that we have. So anything you can do, including funds that you could put in an escrow account to show good faith, anything is a step forward versus just hoping on a wind and a prayer that we're going to come up with $7.5 million or our state's going to, because I don't think that's going to happen. So, but I know all of us would like to see it go forward. So is there anything else from members of the council tonight? Mr. Flores, Mr. Smith, do you guys have any final comments?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Langley, you have any final comments for this evening?
No, I don't. Thank you.
All right. Then hearing none, I think we're all in agreement with where we're going, because the council liked the approach. Okay, then I think we have our direction, and we will stand adjourned for the evening.